In the dense, misty forests of Washington, a shocking crime left a trail of mystery and heartbreak that spans decades. When a toddler was found alone in a Kmart parking lot, it was clear something terrible had happened. But what the police would uncover next, the bizarre murders of two young couples and the sinister signature of tube socks at each crime scene, would confound investigators for years. As new clues emerged, suspicions pointed to a tragic lover's betrayal, a mysterious other man, and even the haunting possibility of a serial killer roaming free. Was this all the work of one dark mind? Or could the killer still be out there, lurking in the shadows? Stay with us as we unravel the secrets behind the tube sock killings, a chilling story of betrayal, loss, and unanswered questions that may never rest. On a chilly winter evening in 1985, shoppers discover a bewildered young girl wandering alone outside a Kmart in Spanaway, Washington. Her name is Crystal Robinson, and she's about 10 miles away from her Tacoma home. When the authorities arrive, Crystal remains silent, unable to say much. The 2-year-old only murmurs to her grandmother, "Mommy was in the trees," without shedding a tear. Earlier that day, Crystal had been riding through the Lewis County backwoods in a 1982 Plymouth Arrow pickup. It was December 12th, 1985. Her mother, Diana Robertson, sat beside her boyfriend, Michael "Mike" Reamer Jr., in the passenger seat as they searched for a Christmas tree. Diana, 21, was just old enough to legally drink, while Mike was 36. This trip was supposed to be an escape for them, a way to leave the past weeks behind. However, neither of them would be around to sip eggnog by Christmas Eve. The couple never returned to Crystal. The remote woodland area was prime trapping ground, Mike's natural habitat. Located west of Mineral, a former mining town frozen in time, it was an ideal spot to vanish without a trace. Mineral had been built on the unfulfilled dreams of gold-seeking prospectors who found coal instead. Mining created jobs for many young men, but nearly a century later, the surrounding forests became a depository for buried secrets. By the 1920s, the coal mines had closed, and a fire destroyed the local sawmill. By 1985, Mineral was simply a quiet fishing spot. But that year, its rolling hills and forests became the site of a case that would haunt the community. Months dragged on, with the Spanaway Kmart serving as the base for a search and rescue mission. Volunteers scoured every path in the county, both on foot and from the air. Police trudged through New Year's snow with bloodhounds, searching the woods for any sign of the couple, digging and sifting through dirt and snow. Yet, they found nothing. Their trail had gone cold. Fast forward to February 18th, 1986. A man out walking his dog along a logging road near Washington State Route 7 stumbles upon something half buried under 6 inches of snow near a red pickup. He assumes it's a deer, but soon realizes it's a woman. It's Diana. She is discovered lying naked next to Mike's Plymouth Arrow. The truck is empty, with blood staining the driver's seat and steering wheel. Shell casings are scattered on the ground about 30 feet from the vehicle. Inside the truck, police find a manila envelope on the dashboard. It bears a note that reads like a final farewell. "I love you, Diana." An autopsy later reveals Diana was stabbed 17 times. Her hands were bound and a tube sock was tied around her neck. There were no weapons left at the scene. Diana's grisly murder would become the centerpiece of what the media termed the tube sock killings. Weeks later, the police would identify a suspect, Mike. The pieces start to fit together. Diana's mother, Louise Conrad, swears that the note was in Mike's handwriting, recognizing it from years of birthday cards. She had long known that he could harm her daughter without remorse. Mike had a fierce temper, known for slashing Diana's tires and blaming her when he cheated. Standing at 6 feet 0 inches and weighing 180 pounds, he was an intimidating presence at home. Reports reveal Mike had been arrested for domestic assault and malicious damage on October 19, 1985, just 2 months before his disappearance. That day, he reportedly kicked in Diana's door, threw her to the floor, and rubbed her face against the carpet before she managed to escape and call the police, who noted marks on her face. Louise describes Diana's relationship with Mike as marred by frequent abuse. Police records show 2 prior domestic disturbance calls involving the couple before their fateful trip in 1985. Her sister, Darlene, remains puzzled about why Diana stayed with him. Perhaps she loved him, or maybe she just couldn't imagine life without him, though it felt unnatural for love to coexist with such violence. He took everything out on her, Darlene said. He would accuse her of things he did himself, justifying it in his mind. In late November 1985, Judge Ronald Hendry issued a court order barring Mike from seeing Diana. Mike was awaiting trial set for January 22nd and was ordered into counseling and prescribed Ativan, a medication with possible side effects of aggression and suicidal thoughts. Despite this, they reunited for the holidays, for the last time. Weeks before they disappeared, Mike had reportedly told Diana he could kill her and get away with it. Louise urged her daughter to be cautious, fearing that his threats might eventually come true. Investigators began piecing together an image of Mike as a potential killer hiding in plain sight. Detective Dave Nizer of Lewis County declared that if Mike were found alive, he'd be facing a warrant for Diana's murder. Years earlier, Mike's father, Michael Lloyd Reamer Sr., had taught him how to set traps in Pierce County's many backroads, a skill Mike used to hunt. His father's exploits had once been celebrated in newspapers, though now his son's name was connected to something far darker. Mike was quick to learn and remembered his father's lessons, like placing traps in specific areas to catch small animals. When Mike disappeared with Diana, his father was one of the first to start looking, offering a reward and scouring the woods daily for any sign of them. Over the past 15 years, Mike had trapped various animals around South Sound to earn extra money during the winter. In his father's eyes, Mike was an experienced woodsman, fully capable of surviving and defending himself against any threats. He wouldn't be caught off guard in the woods, his father said. If he was hurt, he'd find a way out. Lloyd believed his son's truck had probably slid on black ice and ended up somewhere remote. He recalled that Mike planned to check his trap lines along an 80-mile stretch near the Nisqually River, even though his truck was later found far from his usual areas. Mike always carried a .22 caliber handgun on his outdoor trips, making him well prepared against the wilderness or any attacker. Police began to cast Mike's survival skills as evidence in their case, linking him to the double homicide of another Tacoma couple not far from Mineral. On August 10, 1985, Stephen Harkins and his girlfriend of 3 years, Ruth Cooper, went on a weekend camping trip to Toole Lake in Pierce County. Ruth, a machinist, and Stephen, a truck driver, had been living together for nearly 2 years. They enjoyed spending time outdoors. Stephen's brother, Michael, remembers him as charismatic and unique. Their destination was about 45 minutes south of Tacoma and an hour from El Bay. But when Monday came, neither returned to work. Their families reported them missing. 4 days later, Walter Funk noticed a Volkswagen parked at Tule Lake. Seeing it again 2 days later, he investigated and found Stephen's body wrapped in a sleeping bag, a .22 caliber bullet to his forehead, seemingly shot while he slept. Ruth was missing, with only her shoes left behind. Their dog had been shot too. Initially, police assumed Ruth had been abducted, but no ransom or message followed. No trace of the missing woman. Then, on October 26, 1985, hunters discovered a skull about a mile from where Stephen was found. It belonged to Ruth, confirmed by her dental records. Days later, her body and purse were found nearby. She had been shot in the abdomen, and a tube sock was tied around her neck, potentially indicating an assault. Police withheld further details. Tube socks, introduced in the 1960s as athletic wear, were durable and easily knotted. The sock recovered from the scene was tied in multiple knots, a style associated with basketball. Witnesses last saw the couple leaving a wedding reception the day before their camping trip. One attendee reportedly looked for Stephen to resolve a disagreement over a motorcycle accident, though this didn't yield any leads. Authorities compared this crime to a 1984 case where another couple was shot while camping in Othello. They strongly believed the Tule Lake killings were linked to Diana's death and suspected Mike's involvement. The public demanded answers, and pressure mounted to solve the mystery. In December 1985, Steve too searched for his missing friend, Mike, from a plane over the Nisqually River, hoping to spot him. After hours in the air, he came up empty-handed, believing that both Mike and Diana had been murdered. Mike's co-workers doubted his involvement. At Seattle's Queen City Sheet Metal and Roofing Inc., where he'd worked for 8 years, Mike had a reputation as a hard worker. His boss and colleagues couldn't reconcile this with the news. Adding to the mystery, Mike had left his last paycheck uncollected. Queen City's vice president, Rick Puetz, found it strange that he hadn't touched his $316 check or his bank account. Whatever he was dealing with, it seemed unrelated to financial trouble. Lloyd, Mike's father, maintained his son's innocence, telling reporters he couldn't understand why anyone would want to harm Mike and Diana. He spent countless hours searching the woods where Mike had set his traps, often with friends and family who joined in. By New Year's, Mike's missing posters were plastered across Pierce County, with a reward reaching $2,500. Still, there were no solid leads. Convinced of his son's innocence, Lloyd hired a private investigator. Another scenario exists. Diana may have been killed by a boyfriend, though it might not have been Mike. Darlene suspects that Diana was involved with someone else as her relationship with Mike hit a breaking point, largely due to suspicions of Diana's possible infidelity. The identity of this man is unknown. Diana never introduced him to her family, and it's uncertain whether he ever met Crystal or Mike. In the years that followed, Louise raised Crystal alongside her 10-year-old son, Michael. Crystal would never speak about what she witnessed that day in the forest where she left her mother. "The child is doing fine. She was in good health, but she's too young to talk," Lloyd said at the time. "All she wants to do is play." Crystal initially seemed all right, just a young girl playing, found outside the Spanaway Kmart with other children until the store manager announced a missing child. But after the police took her in, her life shifted. Whoever had left Crystal in that Kmart parking lot seemed to want her found, which everyone agreed on. She stayed in protective custody for days until a nurse at Mary Bridge Hospital saw her photo on TV. Though she had minor bruises, the invisible marks of that night stayed with her. Shortly after coming home, Louise noticed Crystal wasn't the same. She was unusually alert, constantly glancing over her shoulder, searching for someone. "She's not happy," Louise observed. "She's withdrawn, different." Traveling from Tacoma to Spanaway Kmart on the way to Elbe would have been simple. Both Elbe and Spanaway were remote areas back then, even more so 40 years ago. But they're accessible via Washington State Route 7, a direct route in South Sound. Spanaway, a blue-collar town of 34,000 today, was half that size in 1985, with few drivers to witness anything unusual. Who drove Crystal to Kmart? The blood-stained driver's seat in the Plymouth suggests that the killer drove her there, a risky move that could expose them to recognition or witnesses. Oddly, the person who showed little hesitation in murdering 4 people spared 1 child. The Kmart was at least 30 miles from the Nisqually River, where Mike typically set his traps. The tube sock killings gripped the media as police struggled to find the killer. Crime Stoppers covered the case, yet no tips led to an arrest or even a promising lead. In 1989, the case became the focus of an ABC documentary, Unsolved, Mike Reamer and Diana Robertson, for the Unsolved Mysteries series. In it, Detective Nizer proposed that 2 killers might have used tube socks as a misleading connection to mislead investigators. Nizer retired without ever proving his theory. As years passed, the tube sock killings faded from headlines as other Washington state serial killers drew attention. Mike's case wouldn't resurface for another 25 years. On March 26, 2011, a man in Lewis County discovered what he thought was a bear skull on his 20-acre forest property. A full-grown tree sprouted through its eye socket. He showed it to a neighbor who delivered chilling news. It was human. Sheriff's deputies searched the land and found half a skeleton. Through dental records, they identified the remains as Mike Reimers. Investigators cut down the tree growing through his skull and counted the rings. More than 25 years. Just a mile from where Diana died. A weathered ID card was unearthed at the scene, but they couldn't determine who it belonged to. They speculated Mike could have been murdered, though his cause of death remained unclear. His intact skull ruled out a gunshot wound to the head, as with Stephen Harkins. Could the tube sock killer have died long ago? Other killers. Washington was rife with serial killers in the 1980s. The Green River Killer, the Grocery Bag Killer, and the Coin Shop Killer all became notorious names. Some faced justice in court, while others, like the Tube Sock Killer, never did. Small towns around Puget Sound, including Lewis County, became burial grounds for killers' victims. Between 1985 and 1987, up to 9 bodies surfaced, keeping detectives busy. Each new murder brought more suspects. Even the small town of Mineral couldn't escape. 4 months after Diana's murder, retired Minister Ernest Smith was killed in front of his home, his Jeep stolen and later found abandoned. The police speculated robbery as the motive, but withheld the exact cause of his death. The Tube Sock killings may have been the work of an experienced killer active around the same time. Gary Shaw, who raped and murdered 2 women in Tacoma in 1985, and William Earl Talbot II, a truck driver who committed double homicide in 1987, both operated in the area, though neither has been linked to the Tube Sock murders. Stephen and Ruth's murders initially led investigators to Billy Ray Ballard Jr., who murdered a couple in Kent in 1985. Billy Ray, a truck driver, confessed to killing the couple but denied involvement in Stephen and Ruth's deaths. The 1980s offered favorable conditions for serial killers. Surveillance was sparse, and DNA profiling wasn't available until later. Blood spatter analysis was still an emerging field, and only a handful of experts could conduct it. Convicting a ghost years later, the Tube Sock killings remain unsolved, with original detectives now retired or deceased. Authorities haven't fully ruled out Mike as a suspect in Diana's death, but his fate could hinge on his DNA. It's the same technology that eventually caught notorious killers like Joseph DeAngelo and Lonnie Franklin Jr. There's hope it could solve the Tube Sock case. 5 of Mike's teeth await DNA testing at a Vancouver lab, where investigators plan to compare his DNA to the profile on the rope used to tie Diana's hands. They also intend to check for his DNA on Ruth and Stephen's bodies. Until then, his innocence remains in question. DNA testing for cold cases is often slow due to a backlog of requests, sometimes causing years-long delays. Detective Pat Beal from the Lewis County Sheriff's Office is now in charge of the Tube Sock killings case. Beal doubts the murders were connected and believes the Tube Socks were a coincidence. However, he feels there may be more to Mike's story. Whether he killed himself or had a scuffle, we don't know, he said on the Cosmic Bigfoot podcast. His dad said he always carried a .22 caliber pistol. That pistol's never been found, but it could be anywhere out there. The DNA test may not clarify all the mysteries that have puzzled investigators. Police haven't confirmed if the note found in the Plymouth pickup was written by Mike. They also haven't revealed if Diana or Ruth were sexually assaulted or any potential connections to other murders. Mike's death remains unexplained. Some suggest animals could have dismembered him after death, which might explain why his head was separated from his body. There's no clear evidence a single killer could have had the motive or means to kill both Tacoma couples in 1985. On paper, their deaths seem like the result of unfortunate chance. Since the Tacoma couples vanished in 1985, there have been no further murders in the forests near Mineral. Their families still await answers. Lloyd passed away at 85 in 1993, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. Crystal, who is now in her 40s, has remained out of the public eye. She has never spoken to the media since her appearance on TV as a toddler. Louise kept Diana's picture on her dresser for years, clinging to memories of her daughter as she pressed forward. "I keep going because of Crystal and Michael," she said in a 1986 interview. I just hope they find whoever did this to her Diana. I want to know why. Louise and her granddaughter may never know if Diana's killer faced justice, or if that day will ever come.